Spin, spin, spin. Okay, there we go. Live. It says that, but we're counting down to what we call the big reveal. It is time for Thursday night Audible Live. Cecil Lammey, Matt Waldman, Sigmund Bloom, Dr. Jene Bramel going over injury news, going over some fantasy football news, and of course, giving you a game update here tonight. Sigmund, it is Tennessee. It is Indianapolis. And, well, it's maybe a little bit more interesting or exciting than we thought it would be.
Not a lot of defense in this one, but a lot on the line here. Remember, these teams are going to play again in 2 weeks in Indianapolis. On the Indianapolis side, Phillip Rivers is playing pretty well, and Tennessee's defense just looks passive. You saw Jonathan Taylor not running with a ton of confidence early, does convert a fourth down, looks okay on a reception. Not the best night for Jordan Wilkins, who Jadeveon Clowney's been blowing up plays in the backfield, blew up a 4th and 1. Wilkins also had a 3rd down inside the 5 where he ran a slant and Alligator armed it, stopped his route, cost the team 4 points. Nyheim Hines, they hurt us. They're using him. He looks great, and he's been the breakout star of the half. T.Y. Hilton looks okay downfield. Michael Pittman making some plays too, but some field goals, settling for field goals, hurting Indy here on the Tennessee side. Derrick Henry looking good. This vaunted run defense that shut down Baltimore last week. Derrick Henry looks like Derrick Henry, although Dante Foreman, who looks surprisingly like Derrick Henry out there, like you have to blink for a second because of the 4, massive, looking good out there. He gets a touchdown reception, and also we saw Derrick Henry miss out on the 2nd touchdown too, as it was a handoff to Jonnu Smith. A fake handoff, some sleight of hand by Ryan Tannehill. So that gives the Titans the lead, really having a lot of success in the passing game. A.J. Brown dropped what could have been a long touchdown. Corey Davis looks good playing with a heavy heart. Lost his brother, Titus Davis, all-time CMU great. Look up the play, one of the most amazing plays you'll ever see that Titus Davis finished. But he's playing pretty well out there. And, this is a back-and-forth game, and it could easily be a who has the ball last kind of game.
Okay, we're going to get to it now then, as we'll keep you up to date on what's going on in the game. But it's time for injury news and notes around the National Football League with Dr. Jene Bramel. And Dr. Jene, it is a Broncos show. And when I went out to practice on Wednesday, Jerry Jeudy was not out there. Didn't have any ice on the shoulder or anything like that. And then Wednesday it was revealed shoulder. And then Thursday it was revealed shoulder contusion. Okay, how much of a concern is that? What is Jerry Jeudy dealing with right now? Because he just had a breakout game, and we're all excited about maybe he could do it again. But what's up with his shoulder, in your opinion?
I don't know that there's too much up with it. I'm pretty reassured that he's going to be able to play. The Broncos said they want to look in and see how he responds to today's practice and how things go on Friday. But contusion could mean anything from an AC separation. Sometimes those are called contusions, even though they're more of a sprain, to just something around the outside of the shoulder itself, sometimes inside the shoulder joint. And I think if it was something important inside the joint, they wouldn't have likely have allowed him to play. And he looked pretty good in the limited video I saw from Thursday's practices. So I'm expecting him to go. If for some reason Friday's practice isn't nearly as reassuring, obviously we amend our thoughts there, but I'm expecting him to play.
Gene, Joe Mixon, no practice Wednesday, no practice today. He played after he suffered this injury, missed 2 games. And now I guess what I want you to do, Doc, is paint a picture for us of just exactly what are they looking for in a midfoot sprain. This applies to Chris Carson too, where a muscle strain or even a sprain in the knee, it feels like we understand what that means for it to heal, for it to tighten up. What are we looking for in the foot for these guys to get back on the field?
Most of the same things we're looking for those other injuries. The difficulty with these midfoot sprains is you're bearing all of your weight on that middle part of the foot. So when we talk about midfoot, we're talking about between the toes and the heel, so to speak. In this particular situation, it's probably closer to the front of the foot than the back. We're not really talking about the plantar fascia that we've talked about over the years, but this is sort of the back part between the big foot bones and where the toes come into that area. So that's a small area with a lot of small joints in there to bear a ton of weight on. And so to bear weight on that, to cut its speed. All of those things can be difficult. And I still think it's surprising that he was able to return to play in that game. And then the fact that we haven't seen him at all. The Bengals beat reporters were trying to figure out what was going on yesterday, and a couple of them were talking about how well he looked like he was moving on the rehab field, and the fact that he was doing everything short of individual drills on the rehab field where they were simulating carries, and he was looking fine doing so. So for them to not practice him at all on Thursday, again, just standing on the side, not getting treatment, watching practice, not really in a position where you'd expect him to be taking mental reps. He's off on the sideline rather than doing things a little bit closer to the huddle and what have you. So just a bizarre situation all around, not unusual for the Bengals over the years. A little disappointing that maybe he's not recovering as quickly as they hoped that he would. I suppose there's a slim chance that they saw what they needed to see on Wednesday in the rehab field and are going to let him do a little bit more on Friday with the plan that he was going to play all along. But I think this isn't trending in a very good direction. We may see him miss another week.
I'd just like to comment watching Jadeveon Clowney tackle Nyheim Hines for a loss in the backfield that he looked like he was running down a hill and like jumping on and landing on his butt, just sliding down snow. I mean, basically the way that he's doing, he looked like he has fun out there. But I have a question about this 49ers second string running back, Deebo Samuel. And you guys can ask me about why I say that later, but he's, obviously you say he's not healthy for individual drills. So any news on their reevaluation on Thursday?
Didn't go well. He didn't practice today. Looks like it's going to be at least this week, and hopefully things are a little bit more positive next week, but unlikely to play unless something really changes unexpectedly on Friday.
Okay, Dr. Jene Bramel. Sometimes the answers are just very succinct.
Yeah,
right?
Not always. I'm sorry, but yes, sometimes they are just.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to sometimes, and sometimes it comes down to a guy's injury history. I'm always worried about Visca, even though they say it's not that serious. You're removed from the situation because you're not in Colorado, where you watched Laviska Shenault put in a fine college career when he was healthy, and he struggled to stay healthy. So are you concerned with Laviska Shenault? Because I'd like to see, Jake Luton with some more weapons around him. See what Laviska could do this week.
I think the deal with Shenault is that this has just been a lingering situation for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it doesn't seem like it's ever been aggravated to the point where it's significant. There was a time earlier in the season where he missed 1 week and then came back, but he's been on the injury report with this hamstring situation for weeks. The reason to be concerned this week is that he left the game on a couple of different occasions and then didn't return back in week 9. So a couple of back-to-back limited practices looks reassuring. He's clearly not healthy enough probably to expect him to get through a full game necessarily. Is that enough for the Jaguars to decide to sit him down for a week and try to get him healthier? They're long past their bye week, so it's hard to know. They'd like to get their rookie as many reps as they can, but at some point you have to kind of shut things down and allow him to heal. I think Friday's going to tell us a lot. I'm expecting him to play for now just because every time he's had some limited practices, that's what they've done with him, even though last week didn't go as well as they'd hoped.
Gene, Nick Chubb, is this just a formality, or is, as of right now, are we not sure he's going to play?
Has the check cleared?
Yeah.
Yes, the check is cleared. I think the only person that's expressing a little bit of hesitancy is Chubb, and I think that's just because he knows he hasn't been formally cleared yet. But all his teammates are expecting him to play. He practiced without a brace today and said that the stability of his knee is back. He's not having any pain. Everybody's very excited to see him moving, and everybody on the huddle is expecting him back. So assuming that things go smoothly in his first practice without a brace and he feels as good as he has throughout the rest of the week, they designated him to return, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't activate him. I was hedging a little bit on Wednesday about exactly how many snaps and touches we'd expect him to get with Kareem Hunt there, and not expecting him necessarily to see the 15 to 20 touches that he had earlier in the year. But everything is going so smoothly this week that I wouldn't necessarily put that high ceiling behind him yet. We'll see if the Browns give us any indication of exactly what his role is going to be, but I'm anticipating him playing and hopefully in his pre-injury role.
Gene, how about Cardinals number 4 wide receiver Kenyon Drake?
I'm surprised with Drake. I really thought, looking at the injury and his and his, the nature of the high ankle sprain, and we weren't really expecting him to do much coming out of the bye. I don't know that the limited practices this week mean for sure that he's going to play, but I think it's a pretty reassuring sign that they've given him some back-to-back practices. So he's another one that I'm going to be very interested to see how they designate him. I'm kind of anticipating a questionable with maybe a game time decision type tag, but he looks like he could be trending to play in a way that we weren't expecting. But these running backs with high ankle issues, I would be much more comfortable if we saw full practice out of him on Friday than just these limited workouts.
He is Dr. Jene Bramel from footballguys.com. Follow him on Twitter at Jene Bramel and check out his second opinion blog at footballguys.com. What's up with the McCaffrey? Like, it's just day to day. Oh, no, week to week. Oh, but he could be back next week. Like, it's all over the place with Christian McCaffrey. And this isn't bogus reporting. I mean, it's Ian Rappaport. You can generally trust what he says. It's not like Jason Lockenfor or anything like that. Like, okay, so it's day to day, then week to week, then he'll be back next week. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that what that tells us is that he went and sought a couple of additional opinions, which means that the injury was a little bit worse than low grade, which means that you wouldn't expect him back within a week, which is what we know. It seems like he was reassured enough from the second opinions that this isn't a longer term injury, not a higher grade situation. Surgery was potentially on the table maybe, but then decided against. And that is usually somewhere between 1 and 3 weeks. Now, we saw with James Conner last year that these AC injuries take some time, a little bit longer to recover than you'd expect. A player that you would hope to get 90% of the snaps and close to 30 touches and in and out of the backfield, inside and outside the tackles, lots of hits to the shoulder and being taken to the ground like he did. They don't want a situation where this continues to get aggravated and his range of motion and strength isn't there. So I think what they're hoping is that with some aggressive rehab this week, they get a lot of good range of motion next week and he's ready to go. It could easily stretch into week 12, unfortunately, but it doesn't look like this is going to be a long-term situation where it's a surgical situation that ends this season. So I think there's a good chance we'll see him back in week 11, but much of that is going to depend on something the Panthers don't know right now, which is how quickly he responds to treatment over the next 4 to 5 days.
Gene, we have to do some strange calculations on our bench right now. Miami, I don't think there's anybody in their backfield, maybe DeAndre Washington, but I would imagine when Myles Gaskin is back, he'll become the starter again. But we have to weigh in how many weeks we have to wait for that. How many weeks? Is this one of those 3 weeks, 4 weeks at the most, or is it uncertain enough that we shouldn't be waiting for Gaskin on our bench?
I don't think I wouldn't be pining away for him necessarily, but most of these MCL injuries are 2 to 4 week deals. It doesn't have to be a higher grade situation like we're seeing with Nick Chubb, but from Raheem Mostert to Chris Carson earlier this year to Raheem Mostert more recently, all of these players, the range of outcomes is a little bit different. When they're telling you that they put him on injured reserve right away, they're seeing this as a 3 to 6 week situation. So it is possible that he recovers and he returns immediately after his time on injured reserve is up, but this could definitely bleed into 15 to 16 as far as weeks in the playoff goes. So like I said, I wouldn't be holding the door open for him necessarily, but I think there's at least some reason yet to hope that he'll be back before too long.
I just have to ask, Gene, because Justin Jackson's the most snake-bitten player that I have seen in a few years, and I'm wondering if he promised you like season tickets to the Reds game and then bounced the check.
No, that was just, I mean, when you said snake bit, that's exactly what happened. First play of the game, they play action fake. He carries it out a little bit, and then somebody gets pushed into him and slams into his leg, and he gets an MCL sprain. And I don't know if this is in any way related to the knee injury that he'd been dealing with over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it's an aggravation of that, or to the same knee, or what have you, or if it's an entirely different injury. But just, I don't think nobody was really sure what happened. Some folks thought it happened in warmups, but if you catch the tail end of the play on video, it's pretty evident what happens. Just unfortunate that it happened on a play where he didn't actually have the ball in his hands. So, and no surprise that he's not playing this week. We just had an MCL discussion about Chubb, and then the other players as we go here. I'm not anticipating him playing next week either, just given the violence with the mechanism that happened. I think it's a good thing that they haven't put him on injured reserve yet. However, that's a reassuring sign. But
is it also reassuring that he was that they put him in like in the third or fourth quarter and he actually played a rep or two and then like left the field?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
I think that's just a situation where, well, I'm feeling okay, but we've had players. Mostert did the same thing, and you saw him kind of collapse a little bit when that knee just wasn't stable enough, and it's very similar to probably what we're seeing with Jackson there. So that tells us that his knee wasn't so unstable that they definitely thought they needed to hold him out for time and gave him another chance. But it also tells you that he just wasn't anywhere near healthy enough to play, despite adrenaline and everything else. So I think injured reserve this year, the injured reserve list is really helpful for us because if a player doesn't go on there, I know there are examples like Mixon and Alshon Jeffrey and others where you would have expected those guys to go on there. But in this case, if he is on the active roster at the end of the week, I think that's a good sign for week 11 or 12.
Okay, there we go. Dr. Jene Bramel joining us here as we spin you around the National Football League. And, well, we had the chat room chime in on this one. This is from Ty, actually. Ty says, Doc Gene, can you speak to the video Eckler posted this evening? Return soon. And Austin Eckler, I mean, if you don't post it on social network and it never happens, Eckler says, quote, the time draws near. Posted a video of himself running sprints. Okay, the time draws near. Eckler can think that, but it doesn't matter what Eckler thinks unless Dr. Jene Bramel tells me it matters.
So he's closer to returning than he is to the original injury, right? I think what we need to see from him is probably 2 weeks of conditioning and practice. So sprints being cleared to run is great. I don't think he was running at full strength. You weren't seeing any cutting there. He really didn't tested in any individual drills or unusual situations. So this is probably the first step. Hopefully that means he gets designated to return next week. They put him through some conditioning and get him working to week 12. I still think it's possible it may not be until week 13, 14, maybe even beyond that we see him reassume anything like his pre-injury role. I think week 12 has always been the earliest target. I don't think this means we're likely to see him next week. I think that would be surprising. Week 12 is still the earliest target in my mind. And hopefully we see some, at speed video soon and then some cutting. But the first sign you need to see is him being designated to return. When that happens, I think you can start the clock and set it at 2 weeks and hope it's not any longer than that.
Gene got 2 concussions, David Johnson, David Montgomery. Other than the fact that Montgomery plays at home and on Monday night, and David Johnson would have to go to Cleveland on Sunday afternoon, is there any other way for us to handicap who is more likely to play or just the general likelihood that we'll see them in week 10?
I think David Montgomery is way more likely to play than David Johnson, if only because Johnson on Thursday is yet to be cleared for any individual workouts. And yes, teams can sometimes advance players through those later stages of the protocol a little bit more quickly, but he's not gotten to that point yet. So whether that means that he's had some lingering symptoms earlier this week and they've chosen to bring him on a little bit more slowly, or many teams have kind of amended their protocols such that we're just not going to put players through that 5-day protocol in 4 to 5 days anymore. I don't expect Johnson to play. Montgomery, I don't know that we need to be too worried about a Thursday DNP because this is essentially Wednesday, given that it's a Monday Night Football week, but the same thing will go for him. If he's not doing anything in practice on Friday, it becomes very difficult for him to get cleared, much more difficult for him to be cleared in time for Monday, even though it's a Monday night game. So be shocked if Johnson plays. I think Montgomery still at least has some chance of going.
So I'm just curious about Sterling Shepard with his toe and hip and how he's doing and whether he's going to get a chance to play.
Yeah, there shouldn't be any issue there. Both of these injuries are things that he's been dealing with for some time. They've kept him on the injured report with a toe, even though, that was the injury that originally got him injured reserve. His playing time really hasn't dropped off that much. He's been reasonably effective. And the additional injuries that he's been on the injury report list have just been sort of maintenance. So he's expected to play a couple of limited back-to-back practices. And unless and until we hear something about an aggravation, he should be good to go.
It is the footballguys.com podcast. We are the Audible live going through those injury notes. And speaking of Giants receivers, I don't want to get conspiracy theorist on us. But Golden Tate, oh man, he's healthy scratch and he's complaining about his role. And then all of a sudden you have a knee injury. Now, I don't want to get conspiracy theory, as I said, Dr. Gene. And yes, I was watching a video on YouTube earlier today about the Fitbit did their global data release. And there was like people up at the polls that were recorded with their Fitbits that were like jogging, which is very interesting because there really shouldn't be anybody up there. But anyway, no conspiracy theory here. Watch YouTube will kick us off. Don't talk about that. Don't talk about that. But I do remember a certain player who went to a certain GM and said, man, my knee really hurts unless you trade me. And then that player ended up playing in a Super Bowl with the 49ers. So, I've seen this before. Again, no conspiracy theory, but isn't it interesting how Golden Tate is like complaining and he's a healthy scratch. And then all of a sudden, the knee really hurts, coach.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you look at the tone of the Giants beat reporters today as they watched what went down,
Frosty the Snowman.
one of them said, I didn't see any of his teammates rush over to him, and nobody were down on their knees on the field because it was a severe injury. And that's as good an indication as anything else that it doesn't seem like anybody from the team is too concerned. So, we'll leave the conspiracy theories aside, but it doesn't seem like it's a significant injury. Yeah.
Gene, the death of Harry Houdini. A man came up and punched him in the gut like rapid fire, and then a few days later he died of appendicitis, his burst appendix. And the top theory is that it was a blunt force trauma causing appendicitis. Does that pass the sniff test to you?
Not particularly, but you can get appendicitis from some sort of obstruction around that area. So if you had some internal bleeding, that would be an unusual place to get it. I mean, you could probably stretch the levels of credulity to make that work a little bit, but probably sounds more coincidental than not.
Thanks for settling that.
Yeah. Trust me on that one, right?
I have enjoyed today the intersection between the doctor and lawyer speak that you've had, Gene. It's been pretty darn good. I've seen the intersection between the two when it comes to certain things. But this would be a good one for you too in that vein, because I want to appease the axe that PFF apparently has to grind with Drew Brees. So I wonder, is the shoulder injury that he had, is that something he's had like all this time? Is that what PFF wants you to know in terms of like why he, that might be the reason why they say he can't throw the ball downfield more than 15 yards without straining himself?
I didn't see too much last week that had me concerned. I think there's a little bit more hesitance in the pocket than you normally see from him. He seems like he's just not quite as comfortable as usual. I didn't, trying to read into things a little bit. I saw his pregame workout on one of the channels last week, and it looked like maybe he was kind of stretching and moving a little bit after he was warming up. I don't know if that's just normal quirks and tics that he has or not, but come game time, he looks like he's throwing the ball just fine recently. So you've seen him with some KT tape on. They've been limiting him in practice. Breeze doesn't seem to be concerned about it. I don't think we should be either.
It is the Audible Live Thursday night, footballguys.com, as we'll make one more trip around the sun with Dr. Jene Bramel, at least the sun on this show. So, Dr. Gene, how do you mend a broken heart? Because I'm thinking about my running backs in Festal OG, and thank God I got James Robinson. But the Philip Lindsay thing, it's like, okay, you're breaking, Anakin, you're breaking my heart. Philip, you're breaking my heart, because here we go with the toe thing that seems to be lingering. I'm watching him every day in practice, and it's like he looks fine. And then I watch his number of snaps and his number of touches, and I go, what do they know that I don't know? What do you know?
I don't know either. I don't think he's on the injury report this week, is he?
Not yet.
I don't think not yet. Interesting. So I was pretty reassured by the full practice, and you're right, in examining his relatively recent snap counts and touches, just before, there was 1 week in there where I think he had more than 15 touches in that 100-yard couple touchdown game there, and then just wasn't quite himself afterwards. And the Broncos wouldn't say for certain whether or not the toe condition was an aggravation of what he had dealt with earlier in the year, but there's no reason to suspect that it's not. If you're sort of hinting at something there, that maybe something a little bit more going on, that we could see him limited in practice to give him a little bit of time, we could, or that this is a player that's just not getting treatment, but more injured than what we let on. So I think his snap count was interesting last week, but how much of that is game script, how much of it isn't? If any of you guys have seen all the good work that Matt's doing with some of his NFL lens things and some of the notes about his vision and acceleration recently, I feel pretty good about him, but we'll see how things progress tomorrow. Hopefully we won't see him on the injury report.
How bruised is the ego of this team, right? Because it's only a few things. It can only be a few things rationally when you think about a team that needs to win, that needs to show some signs of life, that needs to have some energy, and like the heartbeat of that team. And you heard Raheem Morris talk about it last week. Like the heartbeat is Philip Lindsay, and then they barely use him. So, okay, if he's not hurt, what, you don't like him? I know you didn't pay him. So, like, okay, what's the reasons? There has to be some reasons. So we'll continue that. Bloom, I'm sorry. You're up.
That's okay. That's okay because, well, I'm going to go there, Gene, and you can say no comment. What are the chances this season's going to finish on time?
Fairly high at this point. I don't know. I think there's two separate questions here. So is the season going to finish on time? I think there's a good chance that at worst they only add 1 week to the regular season, right? Is every team going to play 17 games? I don't know that we're going to see that. I think, living outside a bubble at this point, there are very few areas of this country where you can make an argument that there's not community spread with NFL players mixing with their families and out in the community and what have you. They are going to be, like all of this point, more or less continually exposed if you're out there well outside your bubble. So, there are some, that would be the end of the politically correct answer. But, I think there is every reason to be concerned that although overall the positivity rate in the NFL is much less than the positivity rate in the general population, as some of these players fall further out of, as some of these teams fall further out of playoff contention, could we see some lightening and laxity in following the guidelines and the protocols to keep these teams as safe as possible? And we're seeing staff members test positive routinely. Many of these players, hopefully they're following the tier 1 and the tier 2 and the tier 3 instructions where people really aren't mixing in that regard. But I think the NFL has plenty of incentive to try to finish the season such that the Super Bowl occurs on time. You can see their level of concern by already putting some playoff contingencies into place. I think there's room for a week 18, but there's really not much more than that. And at this point, with the way things are spreading, pushing the season back a week or two is probably not going to be the answer. It's going to be closer to weeks and weeks and, a month or more if we get to the point where teams and players aren't competitive enough to go. So I don't know that every team is going to get in 17 games, but it seems like that it's unlikely that the NFL has decided that they're going to postpone games moving forward.
Yeah, 2 quick points. I think it's nice to hear this about the NFL players because there's so much you always hear about how young and immature and irresponsible they are, and oftentimes they compare them that way to other sports. And it's interesting that the baseball players couldn't get their stuff around this, and the football players with less actually did. And it's the staff that we have to worry about more than the actual players, which is actually like saying, if you're gonna, well, we're not going to go into what the late Robert McNair had to say about players, but if you were going to say that, you would probably say that maybe it's the staff that's the inmates when into this thing. But anyway, and the second point I'll say is that we need a horse face on this channel, and we talk about Philip Lindsay so that he can make a sour horse face for the fact that he picked wrong. It's okay. I missed him too. Okay. It's all right. But anyway, speaking of running backs, Daryl Henderson. How does Daryl Henderson look for this weekend with that quad injury?
Much more positive today than he did yesterday. It was a little bit disconcerting to see him not practice on Wednesday coming out of a bye week. But Sean McVay never really seemed concerned. Back to a limited practice today. Has all but said, the Rams have, that Henderson is going to play. So unless his Thursday workout does not go as planned and Friday's a little bit more difficult, I think you'll see him this week and hopefully in a sizable role.
And there we have him. He is Dr. Jene Bramel, ladies and gentlemen, right here on the Audible. Dr. Gene, this one or this one? Which one's your favorite? And by the way, I did hang up. Not that you can really see it.
Am I having deja vu?
That's
we do this last
Joe
week?
Number 85. It's Storm Shadow on the cover. But I did that. I hung that up in your honor, good sir. So
nice.
G.I. Joe.
My dad got high at his optometrist office and was doing better or worse.
Camera 1 or worse. Camera 2.
1 or 2.
Or 2. Right. So
I'm sticking with number 2 until you give me something otherwise.
Okay, there you go. Well, knowing is half the battle, and Dr. Jene Bramel lets you know. Dr. Gene, be good, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, good luck. Stay healthy, everybody. We'll see you.
There we have him, Dr. Jene Bramel, ladies and gentlemen. As Bloom You have to be happy
Yeah.
with what's going on tonight with Nyheim Hines,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen.
I have a type, right? Going all the way back to like Lorenzo Booker. And Hines is that type. And just thank the fantasy gods for best ball leagues where you can draft players in the 15th round and you don't have to rely on the vagaries of these week-to-week ups and downs in usage. And we'll see. Hines with his third now multi-touchdown game of the year. They're just getting spaced out, and we'll see. But at least if he's rotting away on your bench, he's not on someone else's bench if they do start using him consistently. Colts continuing to move the ball at will against the Titans, which I think reflects on the Titans' defense as much as the Colts' offense. River spreading the ball around. Nyheim Hines looking tremendous. And looking tremendous in a way where, when week one he finished drives. A few weeks back he had a couple of excellent plays, one on a go route, one on a run after catch. But this is an all-around game that he's playing, including converting a goal and carry. And what we've seen is I just don't think they have confidence in Jonathan Taylor. 4th and 1, they had driven all the way down. They go to Jordan Wilkins 3 times tonight on key plays. And look, it's not necessarily Wilkins' fault that these plays are getting blown up. But regardless, they're not having success in the offense on these key plays when Wilkins is out there. They are having success with Hines out there. I hope it is just that simple going forward. Tennessee gets the ball back on the one, moves it a little bit, but you got to sack Danico Autry's everywhere tonight. You try to see that hit that Grover Stewart put on Derrick Henry. It's like the best hit I've seen someone put on Derrick Henry in his NFL career. So the Colts start to answer that physical intensity. And if they can get this win in Tennessee, knowing they're going to play again in 2 weeks at home, they can take control of the division. So the AFC South, I won't say it's hanging in the balance, but this is the first act, and the Colts have to be feeling good.
Matt, what's this game say about about these two teams in this kind of divisional rivalry?
Well, first, EJ Speed just blocked a punt, and the Colts just extend their lead to 10. So that's pretty nice on that front. But I think that what you see here is you have a Houston team that can't play defense to save their lives. You have a Jacksonville defense that says, "Oh yeah, hold my beer," and then and really doesn't have the offense to be able to compete like they do with Houston. So it is down to these two teams, and these two teams. I would say give you a puncher's chance to compete with any team in the AFC other than the Kansas City Chiefs, mainly because they have the defense to be able to at least limit the offenses in the AFC North, and as a result of that, they have just enough of the type of offense that they play to be able to play physical against AFC North teams. Maybe not Indianapolis, but the thing that we're seeing with Hines that I think is the difference between Taylor and Wilkins is that the Indianapolis Colts line is very used to quick hitting backs, guys who can just hit that hole with a lot of acceleration, which Marlon Mack was very good at. And Nyheim Hines has that great burst. So if he can reach the crease early and spot it early, he's there. The problem is that that's not Jonathan Taylor's game, and it's not really Wilkins' game because they're more cutback guys who press and cut, and this offensive line isn't really made for that. So I think Hines is really fitting in here. But this game just tells you that they have two solid teams, two really good teams that should be able to win a wild card game and be competitive and maybe be able to be a spoiler to one of those AFC North teams that we all like so much.
And it's not necessarily a fantasy take, guys, but football changes about right now. Weather's changing, things are getting cold, and football becomes this defensive mindset. Bloom, does this kind of just this year, everything that it is, accelerate that change? I think definitely what we're dealing with in teams and facilities and lockdowns and all these sorts of things kind of impacted the trade deadline. Mm-hmm. Does it shift the philosophy of just get through the season? So shorten games, right, run the ball, play really good defense. Does that defensive shift that we always see in the playoffs, does it actually start a little bit early? How do you adjust for that in a fantasy perspective?
Well, I'll say this. I don't know about the shift of quote unquote cold weather football this year, just because so many of the good teams are quarterback teams. I don't know that Josh Allen and the Bills are going to convert to a Zach Moss-led cold weather attack. I think it's a Josh Allen team, and so on with Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson, and so on. I'll tell you what I'm concerned about, or at least what I'm watching for, and it relates to something that Dr. Gene said about COVID protocol and maybe players getting a little more lax as the season goes on. We all notice it in our lives. The context of everything in our lives is different, and things that were maybe effortless aren't as effortless. And our ability to stay focused on certain things, or just that rhythm that the hum of our lives put us in, is broken. And I think it's about to be broken even more so as we see the COVID numbers spiking to levels that we haven't even approached before. And I just wonder, especially as players start to hear that people in their family are COVID positive, or if we do see an actual outbreak on a team, as Dr. Gene mentioned, or just as teams fall out of contention. Because when the NFL, you always have those twin forces of friction where even when a team falls out of contention, these guys are playing for their careers. They're playing for their paychecks, they're playing for their pride. But at the same time, it'd be so easy to be distracted this year. And what keeps you from getting distracted is winning and your team and showing up for your teammates. But for some of these teams that are falling out of the playoffs, I'm going to be watching for just kind of mentally checking out, which is something that we watch for every year anyway. But I think especially this year.
Yeah, and who hates distractions more than the NFL, right? Than the old regime, the power structure of the National Football League. And Matt Bloom brings it up, guys, playing for their teammates, but also guys playing because they'll be somewhere else next year. But also it's a cap year where it goes down. So you're like, okay, is that the year I really want to test the waters? Because there's not going to be as much money out there as there would be in a normal, quote unquote, off season. So I think those distractions could be more prevalent for players out there.
Yeah, it's hard for me to want to speculate about what's going to happen with COVID because we were speculating that not we specifically, but as a collective of media was speculating the season wasn't even going to happen. So I'm kind of at the point that we're in week 10. I'm very happy that we're in week 10. And I'd rather not speculate on doom and gloom about it. And I feel like, it's realistic. So like what Bloom's talking about is realistic. It's a realistic possibility. But I'm not going to claim to know one thing or the other about that. I've been inside since basically February, and going to the grocery store, once every other week, and decided that that's basically it. So, at that point, that's all I can say. But the only thing that I will say as a counterpoint maybe to what Bloom's saying is that another way of realistically looking at it is that football players are more disciplined than you and me. That they have to be, that they're in a more team-oriented, do as I say kind of environment. We always hear the instances where they break from that protocol, and we often play that up to a great degree. But I also think that these are guys that understand that they have very few chances to be able to stay on a football team. And I think that we've seen early on that some of these players who took liberties that they shouldn't have, like in Seattle, like the one player who signed on, and basically, I don't think I've heard him being on another NFL team since that point.
No, that was that Oklahoma State DB that snuck a girl into the hotel.
Yes.
And he even gave her Seahawks gear to wear.
Yes.
Incognito.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So he tried to get a hook up and hook her up, and he got the hook, so it's one of those deals where I just think that these players have been put on notice in a way that we probably don't even know the half of it. So I think that they know, and I think we're going to see, them be disciplined more so than we expect.
And there we go. It is the Audible Live here on Thursday night. Bloom, why don't we talk about Rashad Penny?
Well, because the Seahawks aren't talking about him. Because Alex Collins, we were talking about Alex Collins before Rashad Penny this year.
Right.
And Dr. Gene has educated us so well over the years that when it's not just the ACL, there's multiple ligaments involved, they can often take time for the stability. They need to come back. And I think Penny's injury was a late season injury as it was. So you have ACL plus that after the injury happened and when the diagnosis was released, everyone said, ooh, So I just think that he's not that close yet. And I wonder about other names we may hear. They just got Bo Scarborough back on the practice squad.
Right.
So they get to redo that decision. And maybe, I mean, I think at this point, it makes more sense for Bo Scarborough to get early down touches than DJ Dallas or Travis Homer. Dr. Gene had likely inactive for Carlos Hyde and Chris Carson this week. So I think that's going to be something to watch is Alex Collins got a little look, but the fact that they signed Bo Scarborough tells me that, and I think Scarborough's got more game at this point than Collins anyway. So I think that's the name to think about first. And for Penny, it's more of a 2021 thing.
Well, they have a type, Matt, and we had a chat room fired up about, like, could Matt talk about Scarborough there? I mean, I'll bring up Tremaine Pope was a Seattle back. Mike Davis was a Seattle back. Like, they have a type. So, okay.
And they work out somewhere else. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right.
And it's true, but Scarborough's a downhill thumper, and he's someone that has just enough burst to be able to get into the secondary. Occasionally can run some toss plays for you if it's well blocked. But he's a guy that has that one cut and go kind of Derrick Henry type of style in terms of power, but just not as freakish of an athlete or as good with their footwork. But they can play. We saw him in Detroit. He certainly looked like one of the better backs they had until Detroit got rid of him. Like they had a really pretty good tight end and they got rid of him and then drafted a first rounder 2 years later. And Robert Tonyan's out playing the first rounder right now in Green Bay. But you have guys who are powerful. They want powerful guys who can carry the load in terms of they can give it to them 15, 20 times if they need to, and they'll get stronger at game's end. They're basically just looking for knockoff Marshawn Lynch's, and while it's a kind of knockoff that, like, if you bought one for your wife, that they'd probably look and go, it's not close enough, but they might have to take the marker and put it over the purse, where it says Prado instead of Prada, and like fix that or whatever. But it's good enough for what we have going on here. It looks like we have a possible fight with Dennis Kelly charging into the bench here with the Colts bench, but it looks like that cleared that up. But I was going to mention about the playoffs, just the idea that with all the players that Bloom mentioned, most of those guys are running quarterbacks that can generate running on their own too. But I think a guy like Derrick Henry, when you have a really good back like that, they can screw some things up. And I wouldn't be surprised if, see, there you go, Gina. See, there you go. But I think that you look at somebody like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who frankly, has been a top 10 fantasy back and has been very good in that respect as a rookie. But I think the Chiefs' fortunes are going to come down to him. Like, if he can't run, I think that we're going to see some close games. And if he's not going to be able to do what he did against the Bills and what he's been doing pretty much with every other opponent that he's faced, which is 5 carries for 17 yards and then 40 or 50 yards and a touchdown as a receiver, I don't think the Chiefs are going to get it done this year. It's kind of like them losing that wide receiver, or the 49ers getting that wide receiver who had that pain in his knee and it magically disappeared and they went to the Super Bowl.
Right. Once you trade someone, it magically disappears, right? Like, we've got some interesting rules to work with, to be sure. Bloom and Matt brings it up here and talking about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They're never going to go to Le'Veon Bell. Like, that's just not going to be a thing, because there's also going to be a change. We see a change in football, right? But there's also going to be a change in fantasy where that guy that you had no intention of starting or you forgot was on your bench, that guy's going to win your league. That guy could be Le'Veon Bell, especially if they want to have that intent of running and Edwards-Helaire is not getting it done. It could be Leonard Fournette. Hell, we've already seen glimpses of Fournette where it's like, well, wait a second, he's the guy or not? Like, because they still have Ronald Jones. So there's backs out there like that.
Mark Ingram.
Mark Ingram, right?
I mean, oddly.
You're out there, and Bloom, there's these guys you've been relying on, and you're excited about J.K. Dobbins, and you're excited about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and all these sorts of things. Like, the old guy could just replace him and come playoff time and fantasy playoff time and win your league from a guy that you're just sitting on collecting dust.
Yes, and we talked about this on the Waiver Wire show this week. This was the week that the running back section got really long because you want backup running backs on your bench. And even though Le'Veon Bell's been immensely disappointing from a fantasy standpoint landing in Kansas City, he's still a high value injury upside hedge. I mean, if Edwards-Helaire gets hurt, but like you said, Cecil, there's another scenario here, what Matt laid out too, and whether Edwards-Helaire can be that guy, or whether Bell just makes more sense in December, January football. I'll say this. It's difficult. I remember Waldman gave us a skeleton key a few years back to the Patriots offense. How about a skeleton key of when the Chiefs are even going to decide they're interested in running the ball? Because we saw earlier this year against, Buffalo, I mean, we've seen them in games where when the run is there and teams, I mean, it's an interesting tactical stance to take to say, we don't want we don't want Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball. So any play where Patrick Mahomes doesn't throw the ball is a win for us, and then we'll hope to make key plays and stops when we do know he's going to throw the ball. And it was reasonably successful. But now these last two games, we have barely seen them run the ball at all. And, this comes back to the original topic, which is, can you win a Super Bowl like that? Can you win a Super Bowl without relying on the running game? And it sure seems like at least a blueprint. Now it was against Carolina, and Carolina was still in it at the end. So it isn't like they did it against Baltimore or Pittsburgh or Tennessee. But at the same time, it makes me wonder in any given game now, are we going to see the Chiefs even dabble in the run? Because I think there are teams out there, the Jets, the Bucks, the Steelers, where it would be rational to play that way and not run the ball more than maybe 10 times.
Spiking Patrick Mahomes' ketchup bottle with ghost pepper sauce? That might do it. I don't know. We can ask somebody on staff about that.
Well, Matt, what is the key then? What is the skeleton key for the Chiefs and for any of these teams that want to flip that switch?
I think that really, it starts up front. You have to have confidence in your line that they're going to be able to open the creases. And a lot of what I'm talking about with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, every week I watch the games because I'm looking at the box score and going, well, he sucks again at the, in terms of like his box score numbers. What's up? And I look and go, that was a good decision. That was a good decision. Couldn't do anything there. All right, well, let's move on because it's another week where Clyde Edwards-Helaire did what he was supposed to do, and he just couldn't get any yardage. And then there's that game against Buffalo where Buffalo laid down and played dead or rolled over and had their belly pit because it was like Clyde Edwards-Helaire couldn't, basically had like a motorcade and welcome wagon to run through. It looked like he was being inaugurated, basically is, and had the Secret Service kind of jogging by his side, and nobody was within 12 feet of him. But they haven't had that many games. So I think up front is going to have to be the issue. And the fact that they have some missing offensive linemen, obviously they missed Osemele, and he was already replacing Tardif Duvernay. I don't remember. I always get that mixed up, but the fact that they have some issues at guard play is also a problem.
Brian wants to know what's under Matt's hat.
I
always love the questions we get from the chat room. By the way, Bloom, as we are getting close to tying a bow, is that my picture behind you? Of course, it's my
autographed picture, and there's a couple of Black-Eyed Joes in there, hand drawn Black-Eyed Joes.
I was going to say, did you put it like a sticker on my head or something?
It's the rendition. Budding artist in the household. He does renditions of Black-Eyed Joe.
Now, I'm very, very flattered, but then I think, Bloom, and I remember you're in your bedroom.
That's right. The corner of the bedroom.
Is that your prom date? Up on the top of the shelf there too? Somebody's got the prom date hair going on, on that one.
There's a lot of stuff. I figure we'll make our way through it. That's actually a piece of art by an artist here who does great murals.
I can't even see.
Yeah, I know. No,
I thought it was Jesus. I was like, I don't know.
There's a lot here, and there are some things that if I brought them closer to the camera that might cause a controversy.
Uh-oh.
So more than a sorry Joe, and more than demonetizing.
Things close up or whatever that little thing is.
Well, if you go to certain Mardi Gras parades in New Orleans, it really does assume a 21 and over audience. And I'll just leave it at that.
Objects in Sigmund's camera might be closer than they are.
Might be larger than they appear.
That's right. I think Brian sums it up. There is no telling what that seems.
That's why it's wearing shades, I think.
That's right.
They're blackout shades.
Just, Bloom, if you ever happen to, it's that that if it's go time, let's just say that you can always just turn my picture around, right?
Yeah, of course. That's okay. I could tell stories. There's
Gone
actually,
fishing.
I won't. But we were actually talking earlier about eerie pictures. You know, I mean, this has been throughout stories over generations. There are certain pictures that really you feel unnerved. You feel the eyes, but because the sunglasses are there, we just feel like he's saying, like, yeah, you know, like
get it on.
The guy in the shark pool that would say, I don't even remember because it was like 15 years ago, like, I'm going to be walking down the street and Cecil Lammey's going to just pop out of a door somewhere and say, the fourth string running back for the 49ers is going to have a chance this year. That's all. You're just happy.
That is all. Did Tennessee mess up the formula? As we got the chat room firing that up. Now, Derrick Henry's got over 100 yards. But the formula always was very frustrating for all of us. And it was like, wait till about week 8. Remember, you have Derrick Henry march towards the playoffs. Well, this year they came out and it's Henry left, student body right. You're always concerned, even though he's a large man, he's a freight train basically that wears a football helmet. But are you concerned that it's like, okay, it's week 10, dude, and we don't want to see any sort of slowing down, Bloom, of Derrick Henry? Is that formula going to work for this team to just get there to the postseason as they're struggling to get there tonight?
I think what's missing is defense. I think it's defense. Have you ever heard the name Breon Borders? Anyone?
No.
He was a full-time cornerback for them last week. Jonathan Joseph got canned. You can just see, like I said, they're a passive defense. Phillip Rivers isn't that good anymore. This Colts pass offense isn't that scary. And the Titans, just their defense, it doesn't work. A winter running game, shorten the game, kind of. I mean, why did they beat Baltimore last year? Why did they beat New England? Because they made plays on defense. And Jadeveon Clowney was showing up big earlier tonight. Harold Landry, he can generate some pressure. Jeffrey Simmons is very good. Jayon Brown is very good. But the sum does not equal the parts here. And the other thing you're seeing is, Ryan Tannehill and Arthur Smith just don't necessarily have that touch. We've seen, remember, Taylor Lewan is out. Roger Saffold went out earlier tonight. So this just isn't that same Titans team. I think it's impossible. See, it's not that they messed up the recipe. It's that they don't have one of the ingredients. So you can't make the recipe correctly without all the ingredients.
Matt, let's talk about Mr. Unlimited. Not Russ, but Bloom's bringing up cooking. And I'm thinking about food and midnight snacks, and I'm also thinking, well, what does Matt think about these ingredients missing for the Titans?
Well, I think it's fascinating that after a couple of years of having like nothing but shrimps in their running back roster behind Derrick Henry, that they supplemented it with Donta Foreman. That was a very curious move to me, and that he's getting regular playing time, which says to me that maybe what they're thinking here is, yeah, we need to think about Cecil's formula here, and maybe we need to give Derrick a little bit of a rest down the stretch here now that we're up, and we need to get Donta ready just in case things go south with Derrick Henry. And Donta's he had the Achilles injury early in his career, but he's a talented dude. He can catch the ball. Certainly has the power. He's a Cecil motorboat special. I mean, he's a guy. He's one of your types. He's one of mine. I know that's for sure. That's where we intersect. Yeah. And he got an increased role because they didn't. I know they drafted that kid from Appalachian State, and he's not ready. And they had, Dalen Dawkins wasn't the answer.
No, Darrington Evans isn't ready. But doesn't this Donta Foreman talk kind of fit the topic we just had? Where it's like there's a guy that's either lingering on your bench or on the waiver wire that's going to win your league.
I've been adding him in every dynasty league that I can get him in, just as just kind of a like, let's just see, just hold on here. That's not a bad option. Kind of a monitor preemptive deal where I have the luxury, like on good team. If I have good teams and I don't, and most of my backup players are like starters for other leagues, and I just need a what the heck lottery pick. Then Donta Foreman's been one of those players lately for me, as is Richie James, though he's a little bit more of an urgent need. But that's another story.
Richie James, that's a Sigmund special right there.
Yeah.
Love some Richie James. Sigmund, as we tie a bow on tonight's program, what did you learn?
Oh, I got my Harry Houdini suspicions confirmed because, the story of Harry Houdini is just really that's how Harry Houdini went out. I just didn't believe it. No, I think this is a really fascinating game. And Cecil, you've been touching on it as we talked about it earlier this week. It is a change. It is a shifting into a different gear at this time of year, and the games mean a lot more. And I think what we're learning here is after the roller coaster we've had so far with Phillip Rivers, indeed, he is the rudder for this team now. He is giving them confidence. He does give them a sense of calm. And maybe we will see rational coaching with Nyheim Hines. What does that hold for Jonathan Taylor? I think that we aren't writing anything in pen as far as his career goes, but this was not the first season that is consistent with a career that's going to take off. And we have to hopefully entertain the possibility that Nyheim Hines remains more of a mainstay in this offense. For Tennessee, I think that this is just a team that is going to have to drag their defense to victories. And when you look at Baltimore next week, Indianapolis, they get Cleveland, Jacksonville, and this is where Derrick Henry, by the way, bad beat if you had Derrick Henry, just because the 2 touchdowns were basically vultured from him. But you've got Cleveland, Jacksonville, Detroit, Green Bay. So not necessarily something I learned, but something I would say in reaction to tonight is make an offer for Derrick Henry if it's not the trade deadline yet, because he still looks fine. And but to go back to Matt's point, he did miss Week 16 last year, remember, with a hamstring, and then in the playoffs he had that. So something to think about. Load management, they call it in other sports, right? Other sports are ahead of the curve of the NFL on this idea that sometimes it's good to give a player a week off for longevity's sake. So we'll see, but I think that the magic is kind of worn off from the Tannehill-Arthur Smith connection, and we'll see what happens. It looks like the Steelers might have taken the Titans' mojo.
Take it right away. And by the way, Matt, I'm going to have everyone go get Mark Ingram because of that Ravens playoff schedule at Cleveland, Jacksonville, and the Giants.
Yeah, I just picked him up in our Fessel
schedule. Yeah,
I picked him up during the Gene's talk.
Wait, you picked him up in Fessel G?
Yeah, just while we were talking with Gene, and I was looking for a list, and I go, I've got Jordan Howard out of desperation, and I've lost 3 in a row after being in first place. Now I'm at the bottom of our parity division at 3 and 5 after some tough beats and some bad plays on my part. So I was like, I'll take Mark Ingram over Jordan Howard any day. Let me just add that as a speculative thing, as a lottery ticket. But I'll say this. I have learned that we're going to find out what that picture is that Bloom took down off his shelf while I was talking last time, because it ain't there anymore. So we're going to wait and see after this show's over what that is. Because I was either that or a Howard Stern porn like prom photo.
Weird Al? It could have been Weird Al.
Freudian slip.
Could have been Weird Al, right? Private Parts, WNBC. Oh, boy. That's a wrap for tonight's program, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Again, we're almost at 12,000 on YouTube. So thank you guys. Let's get there, right? And I appreciate everyone for checking out all of our shows. Of course, the Power Grid, the DFS show coming up right here on this YouTube channel. So do all those YouTube things. Like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. Dr. Jene Bramel is the man. Matt Waldman is amazing. Sigmund Bloom is spectacular. And I'm Cecil Lammey, a Leo. And saying thank you very much. Well, if I'm a Leo, you know what that means.
Yes.
I'm a jerk.
A king. You're a king, Cecil.
Right. Yes. I think I'm a
king.
You're a king among men.
King.
All right, everyone out there. Best wishes. Stay tuned. Stay frosty.